Hello, beautiful being. Welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about some foundational pieces in terms of developing self-love that you might be missing. And I use this word self-love pretty sparingly because to me it's been a little bit diluted, a little bit mixed up with self-care, which might be the bath, the face mask, the massage. What I'm talking about is really loving the being of who you are, really loving what you are, the gifts you have, the shadows you have, and this is basically the lifelong art and practice and yoga of being human, because to be human is to be constantly faced with opportunities to suffer and choices and opportunities to be in victim and opportunities to not see ourselves and be completely inundated with a not worthy, not enough, not productive enough, not fast enough, not pretty enough that just is coming at us from all directions all the time. So what I want to talk about is really the pieces that need to be put in place to work together in order for us to master that practice of being really, really sure within ourselves, confident in our decisions, confident in our choices, and then further than that, being able to call in what we want because we are in alignment with who we are and we're loving who we are and how we show up. So before we get into that juicy topic, I want to bring something pretty important to your attention. As you've been listening to these podcast episodes, I know you've heard me talk about the Becoming Secure community over and over. That is my love, my passion. It's where I spend most of my time. It's where we really get to go deep and wide and do actual practices and embodiment practices and somatic practices. And that's where the real results come in, because no matter how much you sit here and listen until you have a tool that you feel like you can apply in your life, and I know I give some here, but until you have that tool and then the practice with it in your body, there probably won't be as big a shift as you want. Okay, so that's really the space to make it happen. Anyway, this whole year it's been $29 a month, and as we go into the new year, the price is going to be increasing to $77 a month. That price increase might come sooner if we hit 100 members. So right now, today, there are 80 members, which means the next 20 members, or for the rest of the year, the next couple weeks of this year, the price will stay at $29. But when we reach January 1st or 100 members, whichever comes first, that price is going to jump to $77 a month. So if you've been thinking about this community after listening to these episodes, now is absolutely the time to get in, to sign up, to jump into the course material. And then in the new year, I'm going to start offering live calls. So you'll be able to join workshop calls, also Q&A calls, probably have something that's more like a women's circle, which I'll be leading, which are really beautiful opportunities for connection. So I'm excited to really elevate that experience in there even more, although I am already confident that it's a no-brainer in terms of value. So if you have had it in mind, if your goal is to become more secure, if you're looking for that inner confidence, that deep inner peace, the regulated nervous system, not being in fight or flight so much, those are the results that you get in becoming secure. So I really hope to meet you over there. I'm looking forward to it. And now let's come back to this topic of self-love. So recently within that community that I just mentioned, I put a poll, and one of the questions was really simple, which was, what is your biggest goal? And I gave them 3 options, which was number 1, I want to love myself more. Number 2, I want a partner to do life with and experience deep mutual love. And number 3 was, I want to be connected to something bigger than myself. So basically, to summarize it, 1 was self-love, 2 was relationship, and 3 was spiritual growth. And the vast majority of women chose, I want to love myself more. And I'm not surprised by that answer, because even though I talk a lot about relationships, my work and my gift and my transmission and what I'm actually teaching you is the inner work. And once you've done the inner work, you will attract something different on the outside. You will show up different in relationships. You will attract different types of partners. So for me, it comes from the self journey, actually. And that's reflected in the people that work with me. And that's what inspired this topic today, because when I thought about that being the biggest need, I was immediately like, okay, well, what does someone need in order to have that transformation? So I was driving home on my scooter today, like Vespa scooter. I'm living in Bali right now, and it's very, very common to drive one of these scooters. And I was thinking about coaching and how to facilitate successful coaching. And I was just really in this conversation with myself thinking, I really need my clients to take care of themselves in order for them to get results. And the reason that I'm starting with this story is that the foundational part of making any change in your being, in your identity, is having the capacity for change to happen. So the truth is, if you are completely run ragged from your job or your current schedule, if your body isn't being nourished in the way that it needs to be, if you're not sleeping well, it's going to be a much steeper mountain to climb in order to have any sort of result or any sort of transformation, because your body will always default to its survival needs first. So it will keep going back into fear, into overwhelm, into stress, because those basic needs aren't being met. I was on a call with a new team at this point. It was about a year ago. It's a new little team. And after this session, one of the women said something about, what did she say? She said, I need to go make sure my basic needs are taken care of, and then I will do XYZ task. And I was like, wow, what a beautiful way of choosing herself. And when she said it, it also felt so freaking obvious. Like, yeah, you should go take care of your basic needs. But I know that so often, especially this community of women who are anxiously attached and tend to have people-pleasing tendencies and put everyone else before yourself, that does slip even when we're alone. So I always use this funny example of like not getting up to go pee when I'm working. Like I just want to push and like do more and finish this one thing, even though my body is being louder and louder of a basic need. Same thing goes with food and water sometimes. There's so many memes about being like chronically dehydrated because we just ignore our body, and we spend so much time in our minds that it also becomes really easy to ignore our body. It doesn't feel necessarily as harsh or intense or pain-causing as it really is. But actually, in some ways, we could consider what we're doing in that self-restriction or self-neglect. And chances are, if you were thinking about your sibling or your friend or your child, you would literally never want them to push their body in that way, even though the uncomfortability isn't necessarily excruciating. We just know it's unnecessary, but yet we do it to ourselves. So the first part of your foundation here for building the ability to really connect and love yourself is taking care of your body. Okay, that literally has to happen, or there's no capacity in your nervous system in order to make a change. And sometimes this can become a chicken or an egg situation kind of quickly, because it's like, well, I don't care about myself enough to take care of myself. So how do I learn how to take care of myself more, like love myself more, if I'm not taken care of? And I can see that little spiral happening. Let's just take that off the table as an excuse and agree that we can show up for ourselves in terms of our basic needs. Because again, if you cannot, then nothing else can happen until that happens. So this really is step one in creating capacity and space in order to make a bigger change and an identity shift and let go of past beliefs. So the second thing that I want to mention in terms of foundations here is being able and knowing how to fill your own cup. So that really brings us back to the conversation about needs and values and boundaries. And there's an episode a couple back where I define the difference between those three and talk about how to identify them. But for this, what you need to know is just what brings energy into your body, what allows you to feel like you can pour into other people. Sometimes we haven't felt that for a really long time. We're so often doing this thing where we fill up our gas tank, 25%, just because it's the weekend and we had a couple hours of downtime, but then basically by Tuesday it's empty again. And then we're in this constant state of feeling like the world is taking from us, which can lead us to start resenting people. And it's also a reflection of what's going on inside of our body, right? Where we aren't respecting our own need for rest or time or joy. So this is an unavoidable task, which is learning how to, if you want this result of loving yourself and loving your life, which is doing something that fills your cup. You know that when you do that thing, maybe it's tapping back into a hobby that you used to be into, getting creative with your hands, doing something that's off of a screen, that feeling, whatever it is for you, where it's like, oh, now I want to call my friend and catch up, or like, now I want to call my grandma. Like suddenly we have this energy for these things that we know in our heart is good for us, but that keep going down to the bottom of the priority list. And so it's a good tell that if you aren't willing to do one of those things it's like, oh, I know it's good for me, but I don't want to, that you need more for yourself. Like there's a need missing here. The third foundational piece required for self-love is being able to be regulated in your body. So when I say regulated, I mean you feel calm, peaceful, open-minded, ability to make decisions, ability to be creative, ability to access flow state, ability to access joy. And a really powerful question that I might have asked earlier in this podcast, but I'll ask you again now, is how much time in a percentage do you think you spend in that state? So again, that's calm, rested but alert, open-minded, curious, ability to be playful. What percentage of time? So just keeping that number in your mind now. And as I've used this question in workshops and with groups, I hear a lot of 10%, 30%. Actually, rarely is it above 50%. And if we're not in that state, then we're in a survival response state. So we are out of our window of tolerance, it's called, and we are either in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So whatever number you got, let's say it was 30%. 30% of the time you feel that way means 70% of the time, let's just keep it your waking hours, 70% of the time you are in a stress response. If we're in a stress response 70% of the time, again, there's no space for being present, intentional. Also, your body is suffering from that. Inflammation is happening from that. Stress is deteriorating you from the inside out. So it has to be a priority to expand how much time we spend regulated. And in order to do that, we can take a couple deep breaths throughout the day, or set reminders on our phone to go outside or ground. These are sort of the top, I don't want to say surface level, and I don't want to say bandage either, but they're a quick fix. That's what I'm looking for. These are the quick fix things that can get us back into regulation, doing a 5-minute meditation in the middle of the day, eating intentionally instead of looking at our phone. These are all really good tools, but what we want to do is we want your body to have stronger pathways to stay in regulation or find its way back to regulation when some level of stress triggers you into that survival response. So basically, before we can even talk about I want to love myself more, as in I want to be able to show up as who I know I am in a really big way and change the world and birth this project and bring this thing through and show up online, we need the nervous system regulation tools. Otherwise, facing the edges and the fears that come with that, with whatever you think more self-love will get you, meeting that edge will just send you right back into anxiety, fear, overwhelm, imposter syndrome, because the nervous system can't handle this new identity or new exposure. I'm really hoping that this is making sense. So what does that mean? That means that we have to spend more time doing this nervous system regulation work, which is something called somatic therapy, or somatic therapy is part of it. I talk a lot about that. We do it every other week in the Becoming Secure community because it's so important and so key. And what it allows you to do is continue dropping into your body and meeting these different parts of you, or different emotional blocks that are the thing that are constantly dragging you into, which leads me to my next point, which is the inner work steps, including shadow work, inner child work, and emotional release. So that's kind of what I just mentioned, right? If my body is filled with patterns and loops that are a trauma response, if my body is holding a lot of grief, if my body is holding past frustration, anger, resentment, then I am constantly using a lot of energy to fight against what's in my body. And if I'm using energy to fight against what's in my body, then I definitely don't have the energy to move forward into something that's more expanded, calm, peaceful, loving, because I'm probably, when I say fighting against what's in my body, I'm probably wishing it wasn't there, fighting against it, pushing it away. And I sometimes use this quote from one of my coaches, Andrew Pierce. He says, "What we resist persists." So if I notice that I am someone who has a lot of anxiety in my body and all I think about is that I don't want to feel anxious and that I hate that I'm feeling anxious and that I wish I wasn't feeling anxious, that's just feeding the anxiety. So whatever we resist will persist. What we need to learn how to do is release that from the body so that we can make space to anchor safety back into the body. And we can access what these blocks are through the other tools that I just mentioned, which are shadow work and inner child work. I definitely have an inner child work episode closer to the start of the show. You can go back and listen to that if you want a refresher. And also, the more times you visit your inner child, connect with your inner child, the more information will be revealed. This is just not a one and done thing. I think lots of people, myself included in the past, think it is, because usually our first inner child connection, practice, moment, whatever it is so powerful and deep and emotional and tender that it just feels like it was so potent that it should be done. But actually we need to consistently work with that part of ourself, because the inner child is not just the 3-year-old version of you, it's also the 7-year-old version and the 9-year-old version, and maybe there's some inner teenager work to do. But when you're able to connect to these parts of yourself through subconscious work and somatic work, and again, these tools that I have laid out for you in the Becoming Secure community, you are able to see what is in the way. What is the actual root of this fear? What is the actual emotion behind this resistance? And that gives you the doorway, and actually the key to the doorway, so that you can open the door and move it through the body. The other tool that I mentioned was shadow work, which is again something that we do. We're actually really focusing on it full on in December, which is when I'm recording this episode. So there's a whole month of shadow work content that's going into the community now, and a really deep dive on that, which is really focusing on loving the parts of ourselves that we judge the harshest, or the parts of ourselves that we suppress the most, and importantly, the parts of ourselves that we don't realize are sabotaging us, and the parts of ourselves that are out of integrity with what our values are. So those are uncomfortable places to look, but when you do, it's like literally you bring light and presence and intention and curiosity and love, bringing all that you have to this darkness, and all of a sudden it's just basically shifts, dissolves. There's something that I say in that video, which is also from Andrew Pierce, which is admit it to shift it. Once we admit that we don't love ourselves, just saying that, acknowledging that, can be a really powerful way to free up the energy that we are holding and squeezing, like contorting around to try and not admit that. That just gets freed and released, and you get to do something with that energy, which is now sometimes turning into motivation or just energy to show up, or something just feels free and a lot lighter. So let me just summarize what we've talked about so far, and then we'll talk about what you'll notice when things actually start to shift and what it really requires in order to make these shifts happen. So foundationally, we can talk about first from the outside in. So that is taking care of your body, filling your cup, really respecting your own time, and choosing things that you know are good for you. Then we talk about the nervous system regulation, which can kind of come from the outside in, but is also from the inside out. So from the inside, that's when we're cultivating stronger pathways to being calm in the body, feeling safe in the body. This comes through somatic therapy, emotional release, inner child work, and shadow work. So what actually starts to shift when you start doing this work and choosing yourself in this way? Number one, you are going to get your energy back. So like I said, sometimes when we have these pockets of shame or guilt or confusion or anger in our body, it's taking a lot from our body, which we don't realize, to hold and keep that where it is. So when we can shift it, now we've freed these pockets of energy and things just feel a lot lighter, like I just said. And when you know how to do that, you start to feel way more in control of your life. Instead of all of these patterns and programs and conditioning running you from the outside, from the external environment that has been teaching you who you are and who you should be and is now just acting blindly through you, you've been able to take a bird's eye view and decide that is not what I want anymore. That is not what I'm claiming. That is not who I am. I know it's not even my identity and I don't want it to be. And when you can see that there are choices to be made here all along this path and everything that I talked about, you have a choice. You have a choice how to spend your time. You have the choice to take care of your body. And it's hard to make those choices in the beginning. I totally get it. The resistance, the ego, the I'm not good enough for that, or I shouldn't do that, or I shouldn't spend money on that, or I can't have that is loud. It really is, but you're still making a choice. And right now, it's just that loud inner critic, perfectionist, people-pleasing, self-sabotage voice circling around you, aka a temporary personal truth. Another one from Andrew Pierce, actually. That temporary personal truth is just sounding a little bit louder, but you have the choice. So when you start to realize and remember that you have this choice, you feel more in control of what you are creating in terms of your life. Once that starts happening, the choosing yourself, the energy coming back, the feeling in control, people will notice your energy shift. I know there's so many very vibey TikToks and reels about like, for the first 4 weeks, I think it's usually about a fitness transformation. In the first 4 weeks, you won't notice. After 8 weeks, you will notice. And after 12 weeks, like everyone around you will notice. It's kind of one of those. It definitely doesn't have to take that much time, but people will start to notice your energy shift. And when you notice that not only people you know, but the external world starts acting differently towards you, things just feel like they are working out better for you. You probably start to feel like people are being more kind to you, and it's all a result of how you are respecting and treating yourself. And now I want to zoom in on this word respect again, because this journey of loving yourself in the deepest and realest way that allows you to have all of your power in your control so that you can do what you want to do and be who you want to be and show up how you want to show up requires being on it with the self-respect. You just have to be on it. You have to, you could think of someone who you're just like, damn, I wouldn't mess with them and I really respect them. Like, how do you feel when you're in front of someone that you really respect? You probably want to do the things that they ask you to do. You probably want to impress them. You might want to, show them what you know and have them think you're smart. We could do like a whole reflection exercise on how we feel about the people we pedestal, but can you give yourself that same amount of attentiveness, curiosity, adoration? This is an important practice, which means also being on it with working with your inner critic. So the somatic work and the subconscious work is incredibly powerful to shift things like the inner critic and the inner self-sabotage in a really big way, let's say like 0 to 50% diminished. But because we've been running the pattern of the inner critic with whatever the inner critic has to say for so long, the mind will continue to choose that path. So this means interrupting the thoughts that we're having and just choosing again. And there's a couple different tools for how to do this, and that's all in the mindset work that I teach within the community. But ultimately what you are doing is you're just keeping an eye on this inner critic, noticing when it's the thing sabotaging you, and soon you will start to notice faster and faster. So sometimes you might be like 3 days into procrastination, and then you're like, oh my God, I'm totally shit-talking myself, and this is not working. And then you interrupt that pattern, and then soon it's like one day or the night, at the end of the day, you're going to bed after a shit day, and you're like, wow, I was talking pretty poorly to myself. I didn't take care of myself today. That didn't feel good, but the day's over. We're going to sleep it off. And then it will start to be more and more in the moment. In the moment, I'm noticing, wow, that is like, these thoughts are not serving me. These thoughts are actually mean. And can I just let them go with that understanding that that's just a part of me that is trying to get me to my goal or trying to keep me safe, but it's not aligned with who I am, and I'm the one in control again. Last thing I'll say about the inner thoughts is also the tone in which we communicate with ourselves. So it goes hand in hand, but what I want to drive home is you are not going to hate yourself into a version of yourself that you love. You are not going to hate yourself into change. You're not going to hate yourself into anything that actually feels good on the other side, because if that's the energy that's motivating you to go to the gym or eat a healthier meal, you're just pouring into your own body basically poison for your system, poison for your soul. You're pouring in guilt and shame and really hurtful thoughts. And if you've ever seen that ice experiment where they talk to ice, like someone talks into the cup of water and is like saying horrible things and then talking into another cup of water and saying loving things, the water freezes in different crystal patterns. It's crazy. One of them looks like a gross and ugly, the one where they put hate into it, and one of them looks beautiful. They've also done this experiment with plants where the plants will literally live or die based on how a human communicated with them. It's like that. Isn't that like, it's so crazy and it makes perfect sense at the same time. So you motivating yourself with hate is not going to create a result that you love, right? That's where we end up with things like body dysmorphia and eating disorders, where yeah, she lost 20 pounds, let's say, but it still doesn't feel like enough. Or people who are constantly getting more and more intense levels of body manipulation surgery, at like bigger and bigger lip injections or more and more Botox, and like they literally can't see either that they look beautiful or that they've overdone it because it was fueled by hate. So it will never be enough. Now, that's all heavy stuff. And I know that you have your own goal and desire to feel really deeply connected to yourself. And even if the word self-love doesn't feel like it, let's use secure, self-assured, confident, capable. That's what you want to connect to. That's why you're listening to this episode and still listening to this episode. You're going to start by making sure that you are taken care of. A person who's taken care of is a person that feels loved. And if you are taken care of and feel loved, that's the self-love feeling starts to bloom from the inside out. So you're taking care of yourself, you're learning and connecting to and taking action on what fills your cup. You're working on nervous system regulation. We live in such a stimulating time and world that everyone needs this practice in order to be able to stay grounded and intentional and mindful. And I hear so often from my clients that they want to be more present, right? So you need to practice for that in order to make it work, because the screens and the phones are just 100 times, 1,000 times more than we can ever process. So if we don't have something that we're actually doing to counteract it, like sitting with breath, meditation, journal, like our own mind, we just won't. So you need something for that. And then we have the inner work part of this category, which is the deeper emotional release, the inner child work, and the shadow work. And that's when you start to free energy, call your power back, and come back into the embodiment of exactly who it is you want to be and how you want to show up. Thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you so much for showing up for you. I'm confident that you know exactly what to take action on going forward from here. One final reminder that there are only 20 more spots within the Becoming Secure community at the $29 a month rate before we make our jump to $77. So if you've been hanging around thinking about it, now is absolutely the time to click the link in the description box below. Find that link. I know you can do it. Check out the page. It's worth at least looking at, feeling into. Is this the thing I want? And maybe it is the gift to yourself this holiday season. Once again, thank you for being here. If you're feeling the call, I'm so looking forward to connecting with you in real time inside the Becoming Secure community. Until then, big love.